I agree with you. Um, it's difficult. And logically, it makes sense to say wait until you are 16, 17, 18. But religion is not a logical choice. It is the choice of it's basically a choice of geography. It de-
Yes.
it depends where you are.
Hmm. Of
If you
course.
are in Slovakia, there's a high probability you will be Catholic Christian. If you live in the north of Scotland, there's a high probability you will be Presbyterian, Scottish
Mhm.
Protestant. If you live in India, maybe you will be uh, Hindu or Sikh, or if you live in the Middle East, Muslim,
Mhm.
and there are hundreds of different varieties and
Mhm.
denominations of each religion, and it is very much related to geography. If we look at the writings from the Bible as prophetic and profound as they are all related to concepts of the Middle East. There is
Mhm.
absolutely no reference within the writing to anything happening anywhere else in the world except there.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and so it where it makes sense to say wait until later, it doesn't make sense to ignore your geography and your environment because we are very much shaped by our environment. And if we don't choose to shape our environment shapes us.
Mhm.
So it's a very difficult uh, choice to make. I think that parents who offer it to their children do the right thing. I don't think that people gravitate later on in life towards it very much because there's a lot of distraction. Society pushes them in different directions, and your psychological personality is really developed completely by the time you're 12 years old. So if you don't have a concept of the importance of religion in your life by the time you're 12 years old, you probably won't ever develop it. Um, or it will be very difficult to develop it. So if it's not introduced to children when they're young, they don't have much relation to it later in life. And yet we still have to understand, as you said, that it's a miracle. It's a concept of miracle. It's a concept of belief. And we can't escape belief. We can't live without belief. Um, it's a fundamental part of who we are as people. And yet it's not a logical process because we can believe anything. There's no limitation. So it is perhaps good that we have a set of ultra positive beliefs that we can follow because the alternative is what um, you can't live without belief. So even atheism is actually a belief system because atheism is the belief that nothing is there. It's the belief that nothing exists.
Mhm.
So even atheism itself is a religion, and those who are atheists tend to follow very closely socialist and communist systems. So that's that's what happened in history when For example, in Russia, the government tried to remove or eradicate religion. The government became God,
Mm.
and that just relates back to history when kings and queens ruled over everybody, and they it didn't do very well. Um,
Mm.
so it's also interesting if you look back and uh, realize that the the power of religion, one of the most important elements of the power of religion is believing that there's something above people, something beyond people, something above man. And in the past, the king was God. The king was God
Mm.
in the past. If you look at, specifically if you look at French history and you look at British history, and you go back and look at Egyptian pharaohs, the kings or queens were gods and goddesses, and their power was ultimate and nobody could question them. But when religion came along, one of the important elements it brought to society is that no man is above God, and therefore God's rule is far more important than man's rule. And if you look at the great documents of history, which would be the American Declaration of Independence or the British Charters of Freedom, they all reference the fact that man cannot make the rules for society; they must be made by God, um,
Mm.
and that all men are subject to the wisdom of God, and women, of course. So. So it's very interesting. I also find it interesting looking back in history and realizing that there were a lot of British and Scottish people involved in the transformation of religion, especially Christianity, throughout history. And if you look at the American Declaration of Independence, was essentially written by Scottish priests. It's very interesting. The British Charters of Freedom, one of the documents it was based on was the Declaration of Arbroath. Arbroath is a place in Scotland, and that was a document written by Robert the Bruce, a Scottish king, who claimed freedom for the Scottish people.
Mhm.
And um, those elements of freedom are extremely important in a Christian biblical sense. A lot of it was changed, or the correct word is subverted, changed in a negative way um, through history, where uh, a lot of structures came in between people and God. Of course, being Scottish Presbyterian myself, the Presbyterian belief is that there is nobody between man and God. There is
Mhm.
nobody and nothing between man and God.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas if you are in a more traditional Catholic system, there's a series of structures between people and God that you have
Mhm.
to go through a system in order to
Mhm.
reach God. And that, I understand that. That makes sense. Life has many systems, and there's a lot we can learn from that. But it's also interesting how the beliefs that we are given when we are, and we really were given them by the people around about us and the culture. The beliefs that we are given tend to stay with us throughout our whole lives. Um, so that's why I think today I still have that belief. I'm like, I don't believe that there's anything between a person and God. I think it's
Mhm.
it's absolutely individual. I think if somebody wants to talk to God, they can talk to God. They don't need to talk to somebody else to talk who can talk to God for them. It doesn't make much sense to me. And um, but but it's interesting anyway. Um, it's an endless it's an endless topic because
Mm.
there's
Yes.
so much that we
Mm.
that we don't know, so much that was lost, and so much we are still learning
Mhm.
as we study more and more about history. We learn more and more about the places and the people and the times, and um, it's interesting. You can even argue that maybe we lost a lot of the things that that we knew and that we understood in the past. And maybe we need to search for them and find them again. A lot of history is lost.
Mm-hmm.
If we didn't have the writings of the Bible, we wouldn't be able to reference certain elements of history, certain cultures, who migrated to where. Uh, Interesting. It's very interesting. It all goes back through time.